Hi everyone, this is the first video in a series of videos about association of categorical variables. We've already done association of quantitative or numerical variables, that was regression or line fitting, but now we're talking about categorical variables, which are variables that have that don't have numbers associated with them. Here's our definition of association. We're hoping to make better predictions of one variable based on knowing the value of another variable. There's two big issues that's going to organize our thinking. One is just recognizing what it means without worrying about, do I have a big enough sample to be sure of what's going on, or reasonably sure. And then we'll get into, well, how big of a sample do I need, or given the sample I have, how sure can I be that there's association. So this first video is all about item A, and later we'll get to item B. So here's realistic data. It's pretty real, but not perfectly real, from one of our start of the semester surveys, where we asked, how well do you know Excel? What's your commuter status? What kind of phone do you have, Android or iPhone? And did you buy a paper textbook, or rent a paper textbook, or buy an electronic copy? So for now, we're going to focus on Excel skill and phone type. This kind of table, where each row relates to data from one person, or in some cases one item, is called a case table. So this is one case, here's another case, and so forth. So just looking at this case table, can you see any association between someone's Excel skill and what kind of phone they have? If we were trying to use how well they know Excel to predict what kind of phone they have, or vice versa, could we do a better job predicting something versus not knowing one of the variables? So most people would say it's pretty hard to look at this table and do any predictions or see if there's any association. So we're going to take this case table and turn it into a contingency table, or a two-way table. So we're going to highlight the data table. I did that by clicking here and pressing Control A or Command A. And we're going to make a pivot table. Pivot tables are a very useful skill. Now, not every pivot table is a contingency table, and you can build a contingency table without doing a pivot table if you want to do it by hand, but the two often go well together. So again, this is on a Windows machine. If you're on a Mac, it's going to look a little different. So let's say we want to break things down by someone's Excel skill, and it looked at all the possible values of Excel skill in the data set and said, here are the three that it sees. And then we'll break out their phone type in the columns, and it looked at all the phone types that people had entered, and apparently it's just these two these days. And let's say to count how many people were in each category. So this is a contingency table. It's also called a two-way table because the data is broken out two ways, one by rows and one by columns, or by this variable and that variable. So a contingency table displays bivariate categorical data as counts. These are counts of people, or frequencies. So a good question is, can you tell from this contingency table, is there any association between the variables? I want you to pause the video and think about it, and unpause when you've come up with an answer. So pause the video in 3, 2, 1, pause. Welcome back from pause. I forgot to remind you that we're trying to not worry about whether the sample size is big enough to be sure of any, or reasonably sure of any indications we see. So if you got all complicated with sample size, try stopping again and thinking about it without worrying if the sample's big enough. Okay, one series of questions we could ask is something like, what percent of Android users said they are at skill level 2? And we could ask a similar question, what percent of iPhone users said they are at skill level 2? So pause the video, think about how you would answer that. Welcome back from unpause. So if I said what percent of Android users I would be looking at the Android users column, and 5 out of 18 of them would say they're at skill level 2, so that would be 27%. And for iPhone users, I would look at this column, and 6 out of 13 are at that level, so say that's my answer. Sorry about that. And what would it tell us if those numbers were the same? These numbers are clearly not the same, so what does that tell us? Now, some people might not have looked at the table that way. They might have looked at it the other way and said, what percent of people at skill level 2 are Android users? And maybe also what percent of people at skill level 3 are Android users. So pause the video, think about how you would answer those. Welcome back from unpause. So people at skill level 2, there's 11 of them are 11 of the people are at skill level 2, 5 of them are Android, so we'd say 5 out of 11. And what percent of people at skill level 3 are Android users? There's 13 people, and 9 of them are at skill level 3. 9 of them are Android based. So again, we have to think, what does it mean if these numbers are different? What would it mean if they were the same? I've noticed I forgot a level here. Well, let's make a little bit of room and put it in. So if they're at level 1, there are 7 of them, there are 4 Android users. So what does this tell us? If someone is at skill level 1, I think they're 57% likely to be an Android user. If they're at skill level 2, I think they're only 45% likely to be an Android user. If they're at skill level 3, if I know they're at skill level 3, then I think they're almost 70% likely to be an Android user. So because changing the skill level changes my probability or my estimate of whether they're an Android user, I would say that these two variables are associated. We could also look at it this way and say, if I say someone is an Android user, what's the chance they are at skill level 2? It's 27%. If I tell you they're an iPhone user, then my estimated probability of them being at skill level 2 is higher. So knowing about what kind of phone they use changes my opinion of whether they're at skill level 2 or not. So again, we have evidence of the two things being associated.